The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hello and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest today is Mayor Dwight Burley of Georgian Bluffs and Brittany Drury, who is the Director of Corporate Services and Clerk of Georgian Bluffs, which is a very interesting job title. Welcome to both of you. Good to have you back, Dwight. Brittany, pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Now, what I was going to do is maybe start off with Brittany, because Dwight, you and I will have conversation, don't worry, but I have questions for you. But Brittany, that's an interesting combination of roles. I don't think I've heard of that, but is this a common thing in smaller municipalities, the sort of combining portfolios?
I would say yes. So I come from a larger center. I started my career with the city of Brampton and transitioned into my role with the township about 5 years ago. So I joined the team in 2017. My role has kind of continued to grow and progress over the years. And with that came additional responsibilities. So when our new CAO, Cynthia Fletcher, Miss Fletcher, she started in January, she kind of recognized that my portfolio had grown beyond that of a traditional clerk, while still living in the clerk realm, and kind of transitioned it into a director of corporate services role that encompasses HR, finance, IT, clerks, licensing, et cetera, it seems. But I'm very excited for this new role, and it's been an interesting challenge thus far.
Does your role include
all
planning?
other duties as needed?
Correct. Other duties as assigned, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Does your role include planning?
It does not, no. Planning and building are...
That's a separate portfolio, because I know in some municipalities that is where that is lodged, but not always. I guess as I said, every municipality has their own and unique and different way of doing things. Mm-hmm. What kind of training do you require to be first of all, a municipal clerk, but also that role of corporate services?
So training, I guess, just to speak from my personal experience, I prioritize continuing education, not only for myself, but for our staff in general and for my specific staff in the corporate services department. I guess for training wise, I did my formal education with McMaster University in Hamilton. I did a pre-law degree with them, which was a very interesting experience. Then I did a second degree in public policy. And since then, I've just been continuing my education with AMCTO and AMO, dedicating time to learning IT processes, the finance portfolio, budgeting, privacy, you name it. It's kind of all encompassed in the Director of Corporate Services. So while training is important, I think the experience lends a lot to a role such as this, understanding the municipality, the demands, and the staff as well that you're working with.
David, Brittany is being very coy. There's two traits that she has, and you must have to be in that role, as to have a very, very thick skin and a great personality, and she is both.
Well, don't forget to put that on your next performance review.
Thick skin, check.
And works well with others, yeah. Check. I want to just go back to the training, because I think that it's really important to recognize that those two university degrees are both very interesting, because they are, what shall I say, they're kind of like the foundation for the kind of work that you do, because as in corporate services, you're dealing with a lot of legal stuff. But the other side of it is that you continue to do educational courses, I'm sure, with the MTCO and AMO, which are the sort of professional associations for people in your position. And do you find that there's a lot of change that is coming, that is always coming? Is there always a new act you've got to figure out, and a new political reality you've got to deal with?
So that was going to be my next comment, being continuing education is not only, for the benefit of future career opportunities. It's to ensure that not only you're fulfilling your role to the fullest extent, but that you're ensuring that your council and by association the township is up to date on all the regulations that are seemingly coming out week to week now. And we've seen that a lot throughout the course of the past 2 years with the emergency declarations and the amendments to provincial legislation to deal with the pandemic and respond to it. I think back to March of 2020 and where we were at that time and where we were with our technology and our procedures and our flexibility that now exists in our council realm. And I think of how those changes are only going to benefit not only our community, but our representatives in the future. We're moving into an election year, and now I can offer candidates the opportunity to participate virtually in council meetings, whereas, prior to the pandemic or prior to March of 2020, that was completely unheard of, right? We had the ability to build it in, but only in select circumstances, I guess I should say. Whereas now it's common practice, Prior to March of 2020, we may have been doing this interview in person, whereas now we can slice an hour out of our day and, do more, I guess. So it's honestly, if there was one silver lining out of the past couple of years, it's how we've learned to respond to change and really embrace the technology that's available to us.
Yes, and as we discussed before we started, we're always at the mercy of our weakest link, which is actually internet connection. I mean, it's you've got a great connection in the Georgian Bluffs office, but I was just talking with my producer beforehand, and there are parts of the community or Grey Bruce where it's just awful to try and cover a municipal council, for example, because there's no internet connection or it's very poor. So yes, it's certainly made a difference. Now that actually leads me into another question about elections. You referred to candidates, and what's the role of the clerk in terms of the upcoming election that we have in October 24th, I think, is the polling date.
You're right, spot on. October 24th is the day. So in legislation, I guess if we're speaking formally, the clerk is the election administrator. So everything from pre-planning to hosting to ensuring the principles of the Election Act are met to facilitating information to candidates, etc. Really just ensuring the fairness, the transparency of the 6 pillars of the Municipal Act are met. So currently my staff and I are deep in the planning process, pre-planning. Council has moved to entertain a new type of election in 2022, which will marry all of the available voting methods into one system, with the exception of mail-in, I guess I should say. So effective October 6th, voters can place their vote through internet, telephone, or through an in-person polling station throughout the advanced polling time. So I'm really excited about it. I think our council is really excited about it, and I'm really hopeful that it'll get people out and voting.
One of the things I noticed with the last municipal election 4 years ago was that with those extended polling days, it wasn't just on election day formally, but there was quite a flow of traffic, and other municipalities have noticed this, in that run-up to the actual designated election day. So people were certainly taking advantage of it to vote in person, to vote by phone, and of course vote by internet.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I think the more opportunities people have to vote, the more likely they are to vote, right? So prioritizing that advanced vote, especially considering that, Thanksgiving is within that time. So ensuring that the voting methods are available for, let's say, university students who are home and can pick up the information at their, loved ones or their family members' home while they're away, will only increase our voting reach.
I also recall from the last municipal election that there was a huge concern expressed over the list of electors, which is drawn from, I believe, from a variety of sources, impact mostly. And I know I've talked to clerks and they've said, yeah, it's a problem. We want to fix it. Will there be any progress on that front coming into this next municipal election? Or is it still a work in progress, so to speak?
I would say a bit of both. I am hopeful that there's been progress made in the back end, considering the concerns that we heard in 2018. One of the tools that's available to us right now through MPAC is called Voter Lookup. And that's a tool that anyone can use up until September, let's say, when preliminary voters lists are generated, to go in and update their information without the necessity of, filling out a form or coming into a polling station. So I would encourage everyone to make use of that tool. There's a link to it on our website to go in and preemptively make the changes that you'd like to see on the voters list. Now, the changes in the progress you're referring to are kind of the province taking over the voters list, because what we see now is, the provincial election is earlier in the year than that of the municipal election. And oftentimes the amendments that are processed in the provincial election are not necessarily available in the municipal election. So it creates a duplication of amendments. So for the next election, unfortunately not this one, that provincial list will translate to the municipal portion. So that will remove the duplication and have one central list. That was supposed to be implemented for this election, but unfortunately, we're not going to see that in 2022.
That's helpful because I know that people were frustrated by the fact that they got multiple lists of identification card, voters cards. They got, it was a bit of a schmozzle. I'm sure you experienced it and went through it yourself, even in a smaller municipality.
Mm-hmm.
But I presume that voter lookup is probably the key for people to amend the records.
Agreed. Yeah. So I would encourage anyone that's listening, please, voterlookup.ca, go on and update your information.
Great. Now, what about people who are away at university, for example, who may still qualify to vote? Do they vote in their home riding where their permanent address is?
So honestly, it would depend. So they could be qualified to vote both where they're attending school and in Georgian Bluffs, depending on their tenancy, wherever they may be attending school. So if their permanent address is still listed as Georgian Bluffs, then yes, they're an eligible elector in Georgian Bluffs, so long as they're over the age of 18 and meet the other eligibility criteria in the Election Act. But they may also be eligible to vote, let's say, for example, in Hamilton. When I was a student, I was a registered tenant. So I was eligible to vote in the Hamilton elections, but my permanent address was still in Brampton. So I was also able to vote in Brampton. So it depends on their setup. It depends on their preference. But yeah, so if they are still listed as a permanent resident at their parents' home, let's say, for example, you can still vote in Georgian Bluffs.
Oh my goodness, that means you get to vote twice.
Yeah, it's the same as, if we have someone who, let's say, owns a piece of vacant property in Georgian Bluffs, but actually lives in Toronto or Brampton or the GTA. They are eligible to vote both in the GTA election as well as that of Georgian Bluffs because they own property in both respective municipalities.
Different candidates.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I heard a story which may or may not be true. I can't verify it. That a person who owned property, and I won't even mention the location to protect.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they own property in a number of municipalities, and this, according to the story I heard, they got into their car on election day morning and drove around to all the properties or all the municipalities and voted in them. Today they could just sit at their computer.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
do that, but they wouldn't have the fun of it of that touring around.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, elections are always interesting, and they're the bread and butter of your work. Not all of your work, of course, but they're the bread and butter of the work that you do, Brittany. I was going to ask you too, as clerk treasurer, as clerk and director of corporate services, you're kind of how shall I say it? You're the backbone of the functioning of the municipality. Would that be a fair statement?
Well, let's think. maybe I'm like the lower half of the backbone and the CAO is the upper half.
Well, let me try and make it a better example. You're familiar with an iceberg.
Yes.
Okay. The CAO, the mayor and council are all above the water. Mm-hmm. You and the town and the municipality staff are the group that are below the water, and you're a lot bigger and perhaps more important than just that little bit that's above the water, with no disrespect to the mayor intended.
What a great example. What a great metaphor.
Well, that's David, what I've done all my life. So anyway,
David,
yes.
Brittany is one of the very key employees in this municipality, so she's not going to toot her own horn, but I definitely will. She's the bigger part of that lower part of the iceberg. She keeps the mayor and council in line. That's her job. She does an excellent job at it. When it comes to election, I always think the part that she does is very simple and easy, but it isn't. It's very important that people take elections seriously, go out and vote. And if they want to run for a position on a council and so on, it's extremely important they understand it's not just a once a month meeting. It's a very, very strong commitment for 4 years. And the only way it's going to work so that a council functions properly is that you have to be able to attend meetings and be involved. And it's just not just a once a month episode. It's unbelievable the amount of time that it does take to be involved in a council. And I'm quite sure that Brittany can certainly speak to that too, that as a clerk, how important it is to get council members to come to meetings and to really take part. It's a big commitment, and you have to really, really seriously think about that before you decide to run.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Brittany, if a person was interested in running, and one of the constant themes I won't say harping on, but I've been mentioning in the show, as I talk to municipal politicians especially, is that if people are interested, as Dwight said, they want to consider running for a municipal office, would they be good to talk to you to find out some of those qualifications and the commitment that is required?
Absolutely. So we're actually just finalizing, putting the finishing touches on our candidate information package that will be available both on our website and in print at our township office. And that will detail exactly what Mayor Burley has just outlined, being what are the qualifications to be a candidate, what's involved, what is the time commitment, what committees will I sit on, what's the nomination process, etc. So I actually just put the finishing touches on it this morning, so it should be live by the end of the week.
That's excellent, because when your nominations open? When will the forms be available?
So nominations open May 2nd. The nomination papers, including the paperwork for the additional 25 signatures of support for any nomination, those will be available effective the end of the week with the information package.
That's interesting, because you mentioned that you need 25 signatures of support. It's not just hey, I'm going to run, and you fill out the application and pay your money. You have to have elector support, do you not?
Exactly, yes. So any nomination that we receive, one has to be commissioned by myself or another commissioner of oaths, and second has to be accompanied by at least 25 signatures of eligible electors. So that's the key point. Now, it is the burden of the candidate to ensure that whomever endorses their nomination is an eligible elector. So it's not the clerk's duty to go through the 25 signature and identify that they are in fact eligible electors, which is why whenever anyone contacts me about filing a nomination, I recommend that they go well beyond the 25 signatures of support, so that if an error is identified or, whatever else may happen, they have more than what they need to ensure their nomination will stand following certification.
Now, do those signatures have to be from people in the same municipality, or can they be from another municipality?
That's correct.
They must be from the same.
Yeah, that's correct.
So an elector or a person running from Georgian Bluffs could not have signatures from anyone in Owen Sound.
That's correct. Yes, they do have to be eligible electors. Yeah, that's correct.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. And is there a fee involved?
There is, yes. So the fee is actually described in the Municipal Elections Act. So it's $200 for deputy mayor and $100 for councillor. Or I believe it's $200 just for mayor and $100 for deputy mayor and councillors. And
but are there also other requirements briefly under the Municipal Act? I'm thinking of there was a very well-known case down in Toronto where a councillor was actually removed from office because financial irregularities were found in his campaign.
Exactly.
And, he had held office for 2 years, and it took that time for a judge to finally rule and say, no, you have committed an offense under the Election Act, and he was removed.
Correct, yes. So there's other statutory requirements that come with being a candidate, including the one that you just mentioned, being if you're found to have violated the Municipal Elections Act, then you're correct, you're no longer eligible to hold office. Now, as you say, at times those processes can be slow, being compliance audit, then to a judge, etc. So, for example, if in the 2014 or 2018, I'm getting too far behind myself now, if in the 2018 election, a candidate had been found guilty of financial fraud, that individual would not be eligible to run again in this upcoming election because 5 years has not passed.
So it's not just a frivolous thing, it's a fairly significant thing. And but that should not deter people. I think that from my own experience, it's always a fascinating thing to explore at the very least, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
David, one thing a candidate should do is talk to the people who are in there now as a politician, whether it be mayor, council, or otherwise. Go and have a conversation with them. And I've been in politics for a good number of years. The best way I'd sum up to a new candidate is give your life up for 4 years. And I'm not trying to be rude by saying that. It's just that there's going to be many times where you're attending a meeting where your family are doing something else and something you'd like to attend, but you have to attend this meeting. It's a commitment you have to do. And unfortunately, you got to be real serious about looking at the whole aspects of running for politics.
Well, Dwight, I will say that I would echo that. You certainly do make some sacrifices when you do this kind of work, but it's a choice, and it's not cut out for everyone. But I think everyone should consider it. Dare I say it, that it's the foundation of our democracy. It's because I've heard it said that municipal politics are the closest thing to the electors as you can get. And that is because at the federal level, well, you're in Ottawa and you're back and forth. In Ontario, you're in Queen's Park and you're back and forth. But you're in your own home usually. You're as close as your telephone or your cell phone or an email. And that's real politics. It's real people who have real concerns, and they
David,
can be.
The other thing I'd like to say too, as a mayor of Georgian Bluffs and a politician, when COVID came in, the way we used to do business back in 2019 and so on versus today, a completely different world. Thanks to the skills of our clerk, Brittany, which she should talk about how she set up our Harvard meetings and all this stuff. It's just amazing what she did. And let's face it, all council members were not IT savvy. I certainly am not. I know how to turn it on and so on. In less than a month is amazing what she taught us and how she got us to be able to go completely hybrid with her meetings and so on. It's just totally amazing what she did. And that will never change. It's just the life we're in now. COVID will always be with us. We've put things in place where we're always going to have hybrid meetings and so on with council members. But I'm still a firmer believer that council members should come to council chambers. This is where they elected us for, is come to this house. But there's going to be plenty of times where maybe family situation comes up, a snowstorm, wherever, they can still attend the meeting. Maybe they're down south on a holiday, but they can still attend the council meeting and try to fulfill their commitment. But anyway, Brittany, why don't you just take a quick minute and just explain to David and the audience just what you actually did in such a short time. It's just an amazing story.
Well, how to summarize 2 years of new challenges. So I guess just to be brief, prior to March of 2020, the township was not live streaming. There was no methods of paying for services online. So we had to do a lot of modernization very quickly. So what we see today in our processes is a result of that, being now we have live streaming capabilities. We now have virtual meeting capabilities. We have hybrid meeting capabilities in which members can come into council chambers at their discretion, and those that choose to can participate from home, and the audio sync and the video sync, which is more of a challenge than you would anticipate. And not only that, but we can welcome our seasonal residents or our residents that are snowed in or whatever the case may be to participate from their home. Now, David, you touched on an issue that's become quite apparent to us in that throughout Georgian Bluffs, not everyone has reliable internet connectivity. So not only can they participate through this method, being, laptop through internet broadband, but they can also participate through phone. And that option will remain for both the public and our future council term to ensure that everyone has the flexibility to participate in the council process and ensure that their opinions are heard as well.
Yes, I think that what you're describing is that new reality that we've talked about all along, and it's kind of emerging. I think it's not just it's not just municipal politics. It includes business, it includes schooling, it includes just about every single field, and it's quite remarkable. Remarkable.
Mm-hmm. It's not something I would have anticipated. I do have to say, I think, again, that's the one silver lining, if we can hope to identify one out of the past couple years, is that we've all really learned to embrace the technology that has been, widely available for some time, but not used in practice. So not to toot our own horn, but the township was one of the first to host hybrid meetings and virtual public meetings for planning. So we've had a lot of feedback from the community, as well as a lot of opportunities to collaborate with our neighbors to ensure that not only we're doing our best for our community, but helping our neighbors do the best for theirs as well.
Well, Brittany, I want to thank you for the conversation. And Dwight, you're up next, because we're going to take a break. Okay. And we're going to come back because, Dwight, I've got a whole laundry list of things for you.
Keep in mind, Brittany is there to protect me.
All right. Well, friends, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with Georgian Bluffs Mayor Dwight Burley and their Clerk Director of Corporate Services, Brittany Drury. I'm David Shearman. We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Ani, I'm Carolyn King, and I'm a member of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the creator of the Moccasin Identifier. Philip Cote, an artist in Toronto here, took and redrew real moccasins. We're starting over with the children. The idea is that they would research whose land their school is built on, near, or what treaty area they're in. And the educational kit that we have has all that information in there. And the children just, like, I love it. My dream is that this province will be covered with moccasin identifiers within the next decade, and they will forever know whose land they're on. That's the goal. Educate and awareness with a nice, simple little program called the Moccasin Identifier.
Hi, I'm Gavin Bryant, centerman with the Owen Sound Attack. Catch great OHL action on Rogers TV as we bring you Owen Sound Attack games live, both home and away.
The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests are Mayor Dwight Burley of Georgian Bluffs and Brittany Drury, who is the clerk and the director of corporate services for Georgian Bluffs. And now, Dwight, I got some questions for you.
Go ahead, David.
Let's start with, you did something really interesting, I think in the January meeting, and that, I think we've talked about this before, and that's the Kemble Mountain Trail. The coal sites and an open road allowance that you have. Yep. And can you tell us what the issue was on that particular piece of road allowance?
It's a very amazing story in the area. It used to be used a lot for ATVs going up through, supposed to be on our municipal road across the Kemble Mountain and so on. It's used sometimes by snowmobiles. What we found that the trail that was being used was pretty well destroyed by the mudders. And I'm talking about the big trucks and so on to go in and destroy everything. It wasn't really the ATVs that destroyed it. It was the mudders. And it was quite a awful looking sight. And we found that the ATVs were not on municipal road allowance. They're on private land. And the more we investigated and talking to the people, the ratepayers that own the property next to it, that they were quite perturbed about it and so on. So through Brittany and her staff and many investigations and meetings with various groups, the NEC, for instance, it's a motorized vehicle going through a sense of land, and which is not allowed. And it was quite a controversy because what we had to do, first of all, as a municipality, we could not allow anyone go on private property without permission. So we blocked the trail off for that reason for a start. We knew it was liability. So we blocked it off, and of course then the fire sort of went up in the air and everybody started coming after us because we're closing this trail down. It was used for ATVs for years and years and years. So the unfortunate thing is it was not on our municipal road allowance. It was on private land. So once we investigated and so on, we shut it down. And then we had Brittany and her staff, CEO, had many conversations with the NEC to find out how can we solve this problem. We seeked legal opinions. We talked to ATV clubs and so on and so forth, quite a massive amount of meetings. We found out very simply in a nutshell is that we cannot allow ATVs to go across that so-called trail because it's on private property and so on. So we passed a bylaw and shut the trail down, period. And in that, doing that with the meetings that Brittany and her staff had with ATV clubs, we agreed that we would form a committee made up of various people. And Brittany, would you mind just outline who we got in, looking forward to for making that committee up?
Mm-hmm. So I guess just building on that, the reason when it came down to it, as per our legal opinion, which is publicly available on our website, it's included in the December 15th council meeting agenda. Per the NEP, off-road vehicles are not permitted, just out of right. And So we were found to be in violation of the NEP, being the Niagara Escarpment Plan. And that is why we had to amend our ORV bylaw to prohibit off-road vehicle use on that trail, given that we were in violation of the NEP. But as Mayor Burley notes, in trying to find a happy medium, common ground, and compromise throughout for both user groups, being, walkers, cyclists, ATVers, what have you, we've struck a what we're calling an active trails working group, not only to look at ATV use, but to look at the recommendations of the Recreation and Trails Master Plan that was completed in 2020, and defining trails with their uses so that each user group has available resources to use the trails as they see fit, as a public resource should be used. So more details on that working group are coming. We're finalizing the terms of reference, and we'll be appointing members of all of the active groups within our community, being ATV groups, walkers, the Bruce Trail Conservancy, etc.
Yes, I know that from my own conversations that the Bruce Trail Conservancy users are a huge user of trails in Georgian Bluffs, and they're well loved and well used because the Bruce Trail is a connecting link between right up the escarpment. So they are included in the conversation then.
That's correct.
David, I made a comment one time, which was recorded in the paper, that yes, we passed a bylaw to shut the trail down. A bylaw can be rescinded and another bylaw put in place. There's nothing saying we can't do that. Depending how conversations go and so on, maybe there's going to be some other kind of solution that all these groups and so on can come up with that meets everybody's guidelines, NAC, Georgian Bluffs, liability and everything else. So it's an open discussion. So just because the municipality puts a bylaw in place, it does not mean we can't rescind it. Right.
That makes eminent sense. It just means that, as you said, Brittany, the conversations have to happen. And
right.
This is how you make things work. And I heard the word compromise in there. You are kind of bound by the laws. You can't change the Niagara Escarpment plans at all. You can't change provincial legislation, which may be applicable, and you can't change the rights of a landowner.
David, that statement is not really quite correct.
Okay.
Any policy or anything can be changed with conversations and different way of lobbying it and changing it. So maybe there's certain things that NEC will want to do to change to some of their guidelines and so on. So really it's open for anything. It's called conversations.
I was speaking more in the present tense than the future tense.
I agree with you.
Yeah, sure. All of these things can be changed, but they take those conversations. I think you're right. But right as they stand, you can't change, for example, the trespassing laws.
No.
So it's just a sort of a difference in tense there. But yeah, and that's good that the conversations are happening. And I heard you say, Brittany, that they will be announced, that future discussions will be announced.
That's correct, yes. And not to belabor the topic, but I think this is an example of, municipalities are created to be bodies of the province, right? So we are bound by the provincial policies and the laws. So should provincial policy need to be changed, then lobbying is more appropriate at the provincial level, as we as a lower tier have no, I don't want to say influence, but no ability to change that policy, as you mentioned. So it's important to note the responsibilities of each governing body.
But let me make a connection here that I just realized. If a policy needs to be changed, that lobbying is often best done by the municipal council to the province. And that's one of the let's just say that if there's an issue that needs to be addressed, the municipal council can address the province in whatever way it wishes.
They can. They can. But I would recommend not to put our MPs or MPPs on the spot, but it may involve bringing them to the table as well.
Well, that's what I mean. Yes, of course. Just making sure that they are aware of the issues. Yes. Yeah. Rule number 1 of municipal politics is don't embarrass the MP and the MPP.
Exactly.
But you can always
keep in mind too, David, that Brittany will always be taking proper guidelines and so on. Whereas a politician, we may kind of try to waver a bit, but he'll bring us back in line.
Well, Dwight, isn't that why you pay them the big bucks?
They're worth every cent of it.
Of course. Because the last thing a municipal council wants to find itself in is a legal dead end or a legal violation of, say, the Municipal Act. You just don't want to go there. It's just not worth your headache. So that's why we have such trained civic staff to support the work of a council and the mayor and to give them the good advice. Sure. Well, let's move on to another issue. Where are you in the budget process, Dwight? Where is Georgian Bluffs in the budget process?
We're not going to bother with the budget this year. We're just going to carry it on. We actually are starting our budget process February the 22nd at 9:00. Again, Brittany, anyone wants to take part in that process can register with the clerk. That's our first kick at the cat, basically. That's when we're going to start and see what can happen from there. Mm-hmm. We have a brand new treasurer. She's very skilled at her job, and I really look forward to her presentation.
Good. So that now, Brittany, what's your role in the budgeting process, if any?
Well, I guess I would say that our budget is very much a collaborative process, not only between myself and our other members of the senior management team, but internally amongst our staff as well. So identifying what capital projects need to take precedence, especially moving into an election year, right? We need to prioritize our projects appropriately. So we've created quite a collaborative budgeting process between all of us. So each of us carry some responsibility to assist the treasurer in her role in preparing the annual budgets.
Mm-hmm. And David, one thing I'll say very publicly is that I'm a firm believer you cannot run a municipality on a 0% increase. It just will work. It won't work. So judging by what staff will bring to us, and the council will look at it and see if there's ways we can maybe sort of massage a few different ideas and areas to try to reduce our budget. But a municipality, any business, you cannot operate on a 0%.
Right. And do you anticipate longer-term effects of COVID-19 on the budget, Dwight?
There's always going to, David, COVID's with us for the rest of our lives. There's always going to be some kind of impact to us. What that will be, I have no idea. It seems to change. I laughed at the premier saying that they get rid of the damn mask, which was quite a statement to make. He's starting to reduce various things with COVID. Who knows what's going to happen? COVID will be with us the rest of our lives. It's like I had it referred to as like a common cold. We have to deal with it. Yes, we'll have provisions and budgets for years to come.
Right. And I think, as you said, Brittany, it has changed the way we do the work of municipalities and many other things. So in that sense, it will be with us for the rest of our lives. So yep. The changes that COVID hath wrought, so to speak, are probably things that we will figure out over the next few years. Not easy to quantify immediately, although some things are probably more visible than others. Are there any capital projects that you're hoping to see done? This is not a commitment, and I'm not trying to lobby you or anything, but Dwight, do you have any specific capital projects that you'd like to see done in the next few years?
Well, one project we do have to go right now is our Kemble Community Center upgrades. That's extremely important to keep that going. We are in the process of that project to hire a consultant, in this case, probably an architect, to start bringing the project online. We still want to make sure it happens, and possibly starting in 2022. We'll see how everything proceeds. but that's an extremely important project that we must go. We have various capital road projects that we want to do in our, say, our 4 or 5 year capital. It's all part of it, and it's everything's falling into place. But as for any big major project, for instance, a year or so ago, we done the Ingalls Falls Road project. That was a major undertaking that had been going on for probably 10, 12 years until we finally were able to do it. We probably have many water situations throughout our municipality that we certainly would like to have the opportunity to put into a program to get these things done. And that's extremely important.
Yeah, actually, you've just raised a point that I was going to ask you about, and that's water. You just passed a bylaw, or will pass a bylaw. We're taping this prior to the next year council meeting, which is later today, I believe. But that will increase the water rates. And that, as I understand it, is to support capital expansion. Is that right? Or capital replacement?
Councils are ultimately responsible for water systems in the municipality, period. There's no other word to say it. We are responsible. Having our staff and our expert telling us that we need to build up our capital reserves in case something happens. And that's extremely important. That's why we had to increase water rates. Did we maybe put it out to our ratepayers that we are having an increase and so on? We learned that maybe we should have done it in a different way. Staff has spent hours and hours talking to people with their concerns, trying to explain to them what we're doing and why we're doing it and so on and so forth. And they spend hours with various ratepayers that are on that system to explain to them why we had to do with it and how it's going to impact our bill. And I think people are starting to realize we have to do it. And staff have done everything they possibly can. They've answered every question they can. And we've even got I don't know what the proper word is, Brittany, I'm going to call it a chart on our website where a person can go in and insert their bill in to find out exactly what their bill is going to look like. And that's just, again, thanks to our amazing Treasury staff and everybody, they come up with this idea to try and help people with this understanding. And it's just that we're having a study done right now on our water system, reviewing the whole thing to take a look at the whole project, see how we can improve on it and what we should do. And there's going to be many things coming out of that consultant's report that we look forward to have.
Sure, and these would be changes that might be required for the system. Things like when will it reach its due date, and those kinds of things, I presume.
Yeah, we have, for instance, we have areas that have a 3-inch water lines instead of 6-inch. The recommendation may come back and say it's a must here in the next 2 or 3 years. You must change that to a 6-inch line instead of a 3. We do know we have water systems that we would need to look at different ways of getting them hooked onto better water systems than what they got, because the costs are just out of this world, and it's not really real good water. So we're trying to improve the quality and trying to keep the expenses down. Anyone on a water system is the only one that pays for that water. Like no other ratepayer in the municipality. I don't pay for it. I'm not on a water system. Only the people on the system pay for it. So it's got to be within reason and make sense for them to be able to do it. And let's face it, we got to provide them with good water.
I've heard it said by some municipalities that the water system has to be funded by the ratepayers themselves, the users themselves. It cannot
That's
be.
correct.
It cannot be supplemented or by municipal funding. It's only the users who fund the system, and
That
that's
is
both
correct.
for water and for treatment.
That's correct.
And that's why it's quite expensive. Water is not the free thing we thought it was.
No, it's just that we have a great system. For instance, if we want to talk about the Eastland water system for just a minute, it's a fantastic system. It's a big system. There's plenty of users on it, which helps to keep the cost down. If we could extend that water system throughout all of Georgian Bluffs, it would certainly relieve a lot of headaches and pressures on some of the smaller systems like Potawatomi and so on. They probably have better water too, better water pressure and everything. And it's just, unfortunately, things like that, you need to be able to look for grants and different ways of doing it. And we hope that this study we're having done right now is going to come back and help us with answer a lot of those questions.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. That because you want to know what's possible, and what's reasonable and what's actually feasible. So it'll be now when you get the recommendations, who will make the decisions about that?
I would say council as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
We like, for instance, I might as well put my plug out there. We have neighbors all around us. We certainly like to continue on conversations with our immediate neighbor. Not mentioning their own town or anything, but we'd like to mention that we'd like to sit down and have negotiations and conversations with extending the service throughout Georgian Bluffs. We have a great biogester. City of Owen Sound are trying to deal with their organic waste and so on to the city. Maybe we can sit down and have a conversation and work out some kind of great compromise for everybody in the whole area.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I don't let too many cats out of the bag, but there's many a conversation we can have.
Of course. And that's one of the things that often happens is those conversations actually happen at a very low and quiet level, but they happen, and then it kind of becomes more public, and the public gets invited into the conversation, and eventually things get sorted out. My question then is, with around the water system, the public at some point will be invited to comment once this consultant's report is ready.
Oh, definitely. I can see us having public meetings to have those conversations. By all means, I can see that happening.
Would you see yourself, Dwight, having conversations with other municipalities on the basis of that report?
I can see us talking like we usually do. Georgian Bluffs are leaders in the field and everything we do. And I can see us having conversations with our surrounding neighbors.
Mm-hmm. What about the county? Does the county have any role to play? Although it's not water provisioning, they certainly do have a role in planning. You
mean, and when you're referring to planning throughout the municipality, or?
Yeah, they have a role. I mean, in the
like see, Grey County, we use the Grey County official plan for all our rural areas. Georgian Bluffs have an official plan for hamlet areas, per se. So yes, the county's involved with Georgian Bluffs all the time to deal with planning.
And this water system would include that.
The county have certain things to say about subdivisions and so on and so forth like that. Yeah, they conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's always nice to know who the parties are at the table, because you want to make sure that everyone's included, but also that you know who everyone is. So that's good to hear. That's good to hear, Dwight.
We have to realize, David, that we live in God's country and we're all in this together, and we must all work together as a region. That's extremely important.
If I may lend just a little bit of comment or clarity, the master servicing study that Dwight is referring to will look at the water servicing throughout the township as a whole to help inform development in the township as we move forward. And not only that, the water rates are kind of at the side of this, being the amendments to the water rates that you'll see, moving our systems to a usage-based approach rather than that of the former lump sum. So whatever level or however much water users consume, that is what they will be billed for, rather than the former lump sum approach.
That's really helpful to hear, Brittany, because I was not aware that you didn't meter the water. I presume that if you were on a water system, you metered it. But okay, that's helpful, because that is a huge change for people to get their heads around.
Correct.
Because it's not a fixed cost. It's a variable cost. Although I will say that as someone who has been on metered water in living in Owen Sound for 20 years, it really doesn't vary a lot. Unless you do something like water your lawn because you've got new sod. I had that personal experience a few years ago, and I realized it was going to cost me, but boy, did it cost me. But it was based on usage.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, so we've made tools available on our website, as the mayor commented, an interactive tool, as well as additional information that anyone can go online and understand the impact that the change will have to their respective bill.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. That's good to hear, because I know that if you keep the roads, the sewers, and the waters working, most people are happy. But it's amazing what we can put our energy into. It's absolutely astonishing. But oh well, Dwight. As the old politician slogan goes, a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. And but that's not Georgian Bluffs. Not quite. Excuse me. We have probably about 3 minutes left. I was just going to ask you to touch very briefly, Dwight, on Grey County Long-Term Care. You're head of the Long-Term Care Committee. Can you give us a brief thumbnail of what's happening with long-term care? I know Grey Gables and Rockwood Terrace are high on the agendas.
Yes, I can, David. I'm chair of the long-term task force. In other words, that's the committee's looking after the new development at Rockwood. That process is continuing on. We've hired an architect. We have the consultant in place, and we have a time frame on that, but we're on schedule and everything's going on great. A wee bit of a controversy is over the Grey Gables, where that project is at. It's a Class A home, so there's no pressure timelines on that right now. Whereas Rockwood's a Class B home, it must be done and completed by 2025. So that's the way of separating the two. We're in the process of getting the true cost of what it would cost to get Grey Gables project go along at the same time, and it's fairly expensive. And so we as a county council needs to look at the whole situation, see what we should do. We haven't made those decisions yet. Our main goal right now is this committee that I sit on and chair of is to make sure the Rockwood Terrace new complex moves ahead on schedule so it is done by 2025.
Well, that's great to hear. And just as a reminder to people, when you're sitting on county council, you represent the interests of the county. You are a county councillor. You are not just the mayor, but your interests are for the whole of the county.
Yes, when I'm here at Georgian Bluffs, I represent approximately 11,000, 12,000 people, whereas the county, I represent approximately 96,000 people. And that's extremely important when you go to the upper tier house, that you keep that in mind.
Sure.
You are representing all of Grey County.
Well, I want to thank the both of you for your time today. Brittany, a pleasure to hear about your job. Best wishes in the future. And when there's an election, we'll be thinking of you. Dwight, always a pleasure to talk to you and to find out what's happening in Georgian Bluffs. And I know you'll be back. And friends, you'll be back too. I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking. We'll talk again.
Call the Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Next week's spelling bee? Well, I think you should sign up for it.
You good, girl? I'm good.